Well guys, it looks like I'm gonna have to retitle this video because the problem isn't a collapsed lifter, it is. So apparently this $39 tool, I mean if you can even call it a tool, may be capable of unsticking the collapsed lifter in my $2,000 auction Escalade here. Now, a lot of you guys mentioned this in the comments on my last video, suggested trying it before we actually dig into this thing and put lifters in it. So today we're gonna do just that and see if this thing could actually unstick that lifter and potentially save us hundreds of dollars. So first of all, if you're new here, click the link at the top of the screen. That's gonna bring you to my Escalade playlist. You could get all caught up watching my last video, and everything I'm about to do here is going to make a lot more sense. Now, just for a quick recap, this is my 2009 Cadillac Escalade ESV that I picked up from auction for 2,000 bucks before auction fees. Now, last video, we did a little bit of a walk around on it, tried to figure out what it's going to need, and it seemed like the primary damage and the reason it ended up at auction in the first place was a collapsed lifter on cylinder 7. We did a compression test. The rest of the engine is extremely healthy, great compression, with the exception of cylinder 7 having absolutely no compression on it. Now, after finding a bent push rod in that cylinder, pulling it out, throwing the valve cover back on, starting it up, just running it on 7 cylinders, the noise was completely gone. So we know our noise lies in that cylinder, and it's most likely a collapsed lifter on that cylinder. What usually happens is the lifter will collapse and there's a bunch of room for the push rod to bounce around, then it'll get out of the seat and it'll just bend and pop the rocker off, and that's exactly what we found inside the valve cover. So before we dig into this thing, let's try something with this tool. Now, before I give you guys some more details on that tool and we start digging into this thing, let me just show you a couple of things I did since the last video. First of all, I listened to your advice and I went ahead and threw a jump pack on the battery while trying to charge it, and it actually brought it back. So we have a good video, we have a good battery. This has been sitting for like a week and the battery still held to charge without an issue. So we saved some money there. I also went to a wrecker and I found a replacement hood. It's a little crusty in some spots. However, there is no rust hole, and it also has the chrome trim on the front. However, there is some damage on the corners because some reason these salvage yards love to store these hoods on the edges right here. Instead of laying it on the side, they store it on the points here, and both sides. Always. I have yet to get a hood from a salvage yard that was already pulled that hasn't had this happen, and I didn't even notice that till I got the hood back. So that sucks. We'll have to touch that up. However, overall, it's a hell of a lot better than the hood that was on this thing. Now, one thing I want to try before we actually pull this intake off and give the tool a try, I have some extra push rods here. Now, obviously, if the lifter's collapsed, this is just going to rebend the push rod. However, there is a possibility maybe it popped up at some point. So I'm just going to slide this down there. And well, the reason it wasn't ticking was because when I put the push rod in, the lifter slid down, so it was sitting up inside the tray, which means it most likely didn't rotate in there. It probably just collapsed. Now I'm gonna install the lifter here, not the lifter, the rocker. I have a brand new OEM replacement, but I'm gonna proceed with caution. I'm not gonna like start this thing up or anything. I'm just gonna tighten this down. I wanna see where the valve lash is. No, that's, you could tell. I don't wanna start it because if it doesn't pop up, we're gonna ruin another rocker and push rod. Yeah, no change. All right, so the fix wasn't that easy. Well, guys, it looks like I'm gonna have to retitle this video. It turns out our lifter release tool isn't going to be required at all because the problem isn't a collapsed lifter, it is a bent valve. So the laziness in me couldn't help but keep messing around with this. I put the the new rocker and pushrod back in. And I tried cranking it over again and looking back at the footage. And that pushrod and the valve, the rocker was moving like just like the rest of them. And if you look, the pushrod, it's the same height as the rest. If this was collapsed, that would be considerably farther down. Like they're literally the exact same height. I checked the pushrods at the same length. But if you look at the valve, you can clearly see the one for cylinder 7. I don't know if you could clearly see, but yeah, you could see. You can see how it's pushed down. Look at that. Up, up, down, up. And I pulled the rockers off of this spring, and this spring. So something happened. I know these engines also potentially have an issue where the valve guides could fall out. Something weird could happen with the valves, I remember seeing. So that seems to be the issue. Yeah, let's just pull the whole thing. I do not have a torque, so try to get that out. I think another fuel line off of here. All right, I think that's all of them. Nope, that isn't all of them. Normally I try not to drop all this crap right into the intake, but you know, at this point, the heads are coming off anyway, so who really gives a crap? Get all this crap on the back here. Still feels like something's holding. Oh, caught on the evap line. That's it though. Whew. All right. Intake's off. Probably makes sense to throw a oil pressure sender in there while I'm here, right? Oh boy, I can already feel while I was in there, expenses starting to come on. So I managed to get my phone in there on the intake port of cylinder 7. And you can see the valve is clearly stuck open a significant amount. So I don't know what the hell happened there. I mean, my best guess as of right now is it dropped the seat. But let's continue to take her apart. So right now I got to finish getting the rest of the rockers off, pull the push rods out. I want to pull the spark plugs out just so I don't break any. Well, I got new ones anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter. But the biggest thing is going to be getting this exhaust manifold off. Now, I'm not too worried about the bolts that go into the head because I'm going to torch them, get them really hot. And even if they snap, I have replacements. And chances are this head's probably going to be junk anyway. I don't know if it's going to be rebuildable. We'll have to see once we get it off. But, I mean, worst case scenario, I can extract these on the bench once it's out. The biggest thing, though, is going to be the collector head, the collector bolts, these 3 down here. Those always like to screw up, either strip, snap off. Yeah, so that's gonna be interesting. Right now I'm gonna try to get the I want to try to get this bracket out of the way. I don't know, let's see, I'm gonna try pulling the bolts right up here that just go through the head. Maybe we could get away with sliding the head out without actually having to remove this bracket, and that'll save us some time. A lot of people like to try to keep this stuff together because everything is sort of worn in a certain way on each cylinder. Like this, this rocker is worn a certain way into that valve, and this one into that valve, and this push rod into that rocker, into that lifter. I don't really care. I mean, on all the modern stuff, I feel like it really doesn't matter as much as like the old small blocks, where, yeah, if you're dealing with like a flat tappet cam, obviously the lifter is going to be worn into that lobe of the cam. So you're going to want to keep all those paired to where they came out. But this stuff, I mean, everything's pretty much roller. Lifters are roller. All this stuff too, even though it doesn't have roller rockers in it. I mean, I took used LS7 lifters from my blown up Camaro's 5.3, threw them in my Tahoe with a turbo cam, and random ass lifters, random ass rockers. That truck's still running fine, knock on wood. I wonder if I can loosen both manifolds and then maybe the whole thing will kind of drop down together and I don't have to disconnect them from the flanges. I don't know though. Let's start tackling these freaking monstrosities. 6 point's gonna be your best friend for this, and a lot of fire. There we go. Oh yeah, come on. Let's drop down far enough. All right, check it out. I got the manifolds dropped down far enough where I can actually get the heads off now. These are the bolts I was trying to access right down here. With the manifolds in place, you just can't get to them. And I didn't have to unbolt any of the collector nuts down there, the nuts and studs, because once those snap off, in my experience, I have never been able to extract those studs and replace them. Usually you got to cut them off, drill them out, tap them, and replace them with like regular bolts, or just change the whole manifold. But this way, we have tons of room to get to all that stuff. Let's start with this side before I pull that valve train off, because this is our money side. We want to see what's going on here. One last thing I do have to do is see how much coolant is left in it. A lot of it drained out because of the water pump. But yeah, I guess we'll drain the coolant first, and we'll pull this. I mean, I heard her break free. So I don't know how easy it's going to be to get it up with this stupid alternator bracket in the way. Here goes nothing. Oh, that should come right out. Should. God. Come on out. Okay. Come on out. Oh, the system damage. I don't even want to look at the head yet. Because you know what? Worst case, the head's totally shot. It's like whatever. But I don't know if you guys see any holes in there. Oof, there's definitely a point of contact. Right there. You see where the valve hit. However, I gotta get the water out, spin that over. Looks to be intact for the most part. Ugh, got some rust in the cylinder. You know what, dude? Oh, that's absolutely, that might be effed. Let me see if I have something to clean that up. You know, the cylinder might be scored right up there at the top. Really bad. Well, let's take a look at this thing. Yeah. Just what I thought. You know, it's not even that bad. The stupid valve seat fell out. That's the valve seat. So the valve can't go up all the way. That's why we had no compression. That's why the lifter was making so much friggin' noise. Because there was the pushrod bent. And the lifter was just slapping around in there. There was no pressure on the top of the valve. But I mean, other than that, this actually looks fine. Like, I thought we were going to see a bunch of damage, like, in here. But it doesn't look bad. But yeah, my main concern is that friggin' mess. Because that just looks like the cylinder's all, like, scratched up. So that's perfectly fine. That was just some surface rust, thankfully. You know, one more thing I want to do. Let's pull these lifters out. I just want to make sure the cam on that back cylinder is fine from the lifter just kind of smacking up against it all this time with no pressure on it. That was intake on cylinder 7 right there. Come on, baby. Whew. So as you can see, this head is perfectly fine. Next up, just got to shop around, weigh my options, see if I either want to get these rebuilt or just order a new set of heads. All right, so it is the next day, and I already dropped the heads off over at Head Games Motorworks, so they're in the works of getting repaired, and next video we'll be able to finish this thing up. However, right now I just want to go through what that tool actually would do in case we did have a stuck lifter. You know, it wasn't a collapsed valve seat or whatever you want to call it. And I'll also point out the differences between the AFM motors and non-AFM, so you could kind of identify what you have in case you are looking at buying one of these and you want to get one that doesn't have AFM. So as you can see, I already went ahead and removed the valley cover, and if it was a stuck lifter and we would have been just trying this tool out, that's all we would have had to do. We just would have had to remove the intake and the valley cover to get to the little oil ports here. And as you can see, this motor is not AFM. I know initially there was some speculation whether or not this is an AFM motor. 2009, they officially went to AFM in 2010, so some people speculated online, from what I read, was that these motors still had the hardware in there, it just wasn't turned on. But a dead giveaway, and it didn't even strike me to even look. I was trying to look back at footage, being I don't have this truck at the garage, I kind of got to travel to and from it to work on it. But you can see it has a completely flat valley cover. If this was an AFM motor, you'd have all those veins and those bumps sticking up where all the oil and shit flows through. And in here, you would have just a huge solenoid pack. So right off the bat, you could tell just by looking at the outside of this non-AFM motor. On top of that, the lifters are non-AFM. These are just regular LS lifters. They don't have the weird spring on the top of them. So yeah, non-AFM motor. And the way this tool would have actually worked, if we did have a stuck lifter, it would just slide down the oil passage here of the stuck lifter, and you'll see it'll come right in and just sit right against that lifter. And the goal here would be just to tap that with a hammer and shock that lifter free and get it to pop back up. And there are a lot of views and people using this in just YouTube videos, not only on CrazedPerformance page who made this tool, but just people who bought it in general, just regular guys trying it out. And it does seem to work quite a few times. There are the occasional lifters that you can't unstick them, or you'll unstick them, you'll start it up and it'll collapse again. But I mean, for 40 bucks, just pulling the intake and the valley cover, definitely worth a try over pulling the heads and like throwing all new lifters in it. That's also to say, as long as the cam isn't wiped out. So if you were driving this long enough and you wiped the shit out of the cam, there's no helping you anyway. You'd have to put a cam and lifters in it anyway. But for 40 bucks, it's a pretty nice little tool to try, and I'm definitely going to be keeping this in my toolbox in case I ever do come across something that I own that will ever have AFM. So unfortunately, it looks like that's all we're going to be able to accomplish today. I mean, at least we got the thing torn down. It wasn't an easy fix, but we know what's wrong with it now. The cylinder looks all right. I actually cranked the motor over and I took a look at the piston right at top dead center. It looks like it's sitting flat, so I was kind of afraid maybe the rod could have gotten bent or there could have been some damage there. It doesn't look like there is, so I'll just knock on all the wood that's in this thing that's not the case. But the heads are in the process of being fixed. Next video, we're going to get this thing back together. We're going to finish all the mechanical repairs. I got like spark plugs, wires, gasket set, new water pump going on, and we're finally going to be able to take it on its maiden voyage.